Looks like we're running, so let's get our little show on the road for our Evolution Hour, 12th of January 2026. Starting off with a bang or two, as we all can clearly see. Welcome to TortuganWordPress.com and the exciting world of all the little projects that I and my Jackson Wheat and on one form or another in our various groups, such as Dan Stern Cardinale and Zach Hancock and Dapper Dino and Erica Gutsick Gibbon and all the little people that contribute to our happy times, can offer to try to improve knowledge, to share knowledge, and to not make everything more on people in the way that so much of media does. As you are well aware, we are continuing our ongoing source by source of creationist dinosaur book Titans, written by T and Joel Tay, trying to refute bird evolution in this chapter. We noted full waffling ornithines last week, and also a Luskin week. So we will be adding a few sources in that ongoing analysis, which, spoiler alert, their case, it's just the same old. Handed to them for bravado to just keep citing sources as if helping their main contention is junk DNA isn't really a thing. Certainly the vast majority of retrotransposons and various knocking around in the genome, pseudogenes and all the rest must in fact be designed and intentional and doing something. As we know, that's not a viable argument, and presented so far in their long list. We're about 160 some odd sources into it. There's some 800 plus. Exactly how many they did indicate, well, we'll find out by the time we're ending on this. This is going to be certainly cover a hell of a lot of time because there's so many other topics to deal with. If I speeded it up, doubled it by doing it every bloody week, I think I would get bored silly constantly seeing that. At least we get to intersperse every other week with other people claptrap in the creationist community and occasionally just general science material. But anyway, back off to Sarfati and Tay's book. They launch into not exactly an alphabetical analysis, but the supposed instances of proposed ancestor links between birds and dinosaurs and how supposedly none of them are up. They right off the bat launch into Archaeoraptor. For anybody that's familiar with intelligent design apologetics, Jonathan Wells made a big deal out of that, even calling it, I think, the Piltdown bird, which was a hi there, Vesta. Quite the week we are having, thanks to DJT. Oh, indeed we are. And we don't know what the hell is going to be going on, what's going on behind the scenes, whether or not it's going to be an invasion of Denmark next, and all the rest. And frankly, the cabinet meetings that I would love to be seeing would be the ones that he's not televising, which would be going on as to what the hell is going to be going on in this. Plus all the monstrosity with ICE and their arrogance. J.D. Vance and Kristi Noem are all showing, and Steve Miller, obviously, are showing exactly what shallow characters they are. And don't blame me. I voted for Harris. It's not my doing. 77 million American voters voted for the Trumpistas, but I ain't one of them. So we are just watching as the Trump Titanic, partly with us aboard, sails into who knows what dangerous waters. Whether or not the Supreme Court's going to have any useful things to do for the next few years on this front, what's going on at the state level and others, it's a murky mess. And certainly our adversaries abroad are just chortling over the disarray that nincompoop Trump is putting us through. Sidebar, let's get back to the actual topic of the thing. So Archaeopteryx was a fossil that was touted briefly in National Geographic back in 1999. That Stephen Sirk is involved in it. Passed on, by the way, in a few years since. Wrote some stuff with Alan Feduccia. It's an interesting little bedfellow relationship there. But anyway, that Storrs Olson, there are two camps of bird dinosaur groupies that run in kind of this little niche. One is the Museum of Natural History in New York, which is definitely bird dinosaur camp. And then Storrs Olson and his cluster of old style ornithology crowd that's more out of the Smithsonian, who were very, very skeptical of all of this stuff. And they've been kind of foot dragging. Well, they were just primed. Storrs Olson was absolutely primed to pounce on this fossil that had not been put up in a paper in Nature or Science. There were all sorts of little quibbly rumors that indicated that this was maybe not a real fossil, maybe a chimera that was cobbled together. And shit hit fan. And anti-evolutionists were just happy to play this up, and intelligent designers to this day will be doing that, as well as young Earth creationists, but definitely intelligent design. Well, it's interesting that so many of the little fiddly bit details of how Archaeoraptor got exposed and how long this took and what exactly were the pieces that had been done to make the fake fossil. And there's an awful lot of fake fossil trade that goes on, particularly out of China. The little fiddly bit details, by some strange coincidence, Sarfati and Tay all left out. So one is, boy, this had a short shelf life. Archaeoraptor shit hit fan within the matter of months. And by 2000, it was boop, gone with the wind. But what was really interesting about it, vastly more interesting than the chimeric fossil, were the pieces of it, of which one was Microraptor. And it's interesting that in this section in Sarfati and Tay's book, and in the section later on that we'll be getting to in weeks to come on Microraptor, no mention whatsoever that was the other half of the Archaeoraptor thing. So in this case, it was a case where you had two perfectly legitimate fossils that had gotten chimeric together, that clearly Scientific American went overboard in not listening to the doubts that were swirling around this fossil, and they got burned on it, and it was out of the picture very, very quickly. So, but Sarfati and Tay want to present this as a big gotcha moment to set the stage, spoil the water right off the bat. And so they're quoting extensively from Storrs Olson's criticisms, which are perfectly fine ones. But what's interesting is in the footnotes and in the main text, no indication of the dates. No indication that this stuff was taking place over a period of months, not years. It was absolutely minor. And of course, 1999 is 20th century, kids. That's a very, very long time ago. And I don't know of any. Isn't the caushal two non-related fossils slapped together to make it have a, yeah. Oh, yeah. It was so dicey at the time. That's the reason why nobody at Nature or Science was willing. This should have been a serious warning flag. Legitimately got their feet burned on this little puppy. But the fact is that I don't know of any comparable example to Archaeoraptor in dinosaur paleontology, bird phylogeny, and all the rest in the quarter of a century since then. So it's a complete, calling it the Piltdown bird, I think is even worse. Because it's not, Piltdown lasted a lot longer and has far deeper issues. It's more in the category of Nebraska man that creationists love to play around with. So it was a fascinating little blip on that. Now, we're already at a point where the vast majority of the sources that are being cited in the book are creationists, and an awful lot of it from Sarfati and his little buddies at CMI. They're not exactly jumping out of their frame on this. And even though this is the chapter that has the most footnotes of any of the chapters so far, it's very dicey as how they're playing around with material. So there's a definite deck stacking when they get to Archaeopteryx, where they're really diving into the technical literature, kinda, and it's because about the phylogeny of things, how dinosaurs and birds connect up. Turns out a cautionary tale, yeah. I'll put in here the reference to Microraptor because everybody can Google that little puppy. Microraptor is that wacky thing that's got feathers on both front ends, which make it very systematically interesting. And that, as Jackson Weed has often pointed out in his commentaries, and that is eerily like the logical intermediate that was suggested between birds and reptiles back by Hinchcliffe or something like that, way back in the 19th century. Not Hinchcliffe, the name suddenly escapes. And we noted it in Rocks Were There, Volume 1. Anyhow, a 1993 paper from Alan Feduccia. Alas, I don't have a link up to, but I will be putting up the abstract to it from magazine. Perfectly approaching claw characteristics of and the 2004 paper by Videller was way more of a stretch. It was on vortexes generated by on swifts and how this indicates how they can fly very quickly. No discussion of examples. This is not a paleontological paper at all. So basically, Sarfati and Tay are kind of end running to imply that because high flyers have these aerodynamic characteristics, that somehow that helps buttress the argument that Archaeopteryx was just, air quotes, normal bird, even though we know that, in fact, it wasn't quite. Down to that whole matter of what would an intermediate between birds and dinosaurs actually look like that Sarfati and Tay would have to accept. And as I have pointed out in many opportunities when given the chance to mention it, 0 counterexamples anywhere in the entire history of anti-evolutionism where you can ever catch an anti-evolution they would accept, unless it is a weird chimera like a and half that of a form, you know, your croc that is in fact the opposite of what an actual intermediate. And in order to be conceptualize that, they would have to really boil down the bit details at a level that they're not willing to. Fatty and Tay are not willing to do that. We've already claimed, and they don't even document it, about the digit issue without mentioning whoops, it looks like we're okay. Our clock is starting to move again. And okay, I think we are frozen up here. Or a little forward. It seemed, oh, there we go. 14. Yes. Not sure my sound and video are going to be coming. Yeah, I'm getting really sporadic issues on the clock timer on the screen to indicate what's happening here. So we're about whether or not the signal is coming in. In fact, it suddenly jumped up to 1331. I'm not here. I may be dropping out. So we will just wing it, appropriate for birds. Yeah, the timer is very, very is going on. Anyway, and here, or if anything is coming through, remember there will be a complete list of sources that will be put up that will matter. Okay, so now it's at now it's starting to look like it's maybe clicking more. Okay, yeah, we may have resolved some of the signal connectivity issues, so we'll cross our fingers and continue here. So there's only one of papers so far in this Sarfati and Tay section is one that is actually documenting, arguing the bird-dino 29 case. specimen that varied from the ones in the Solnhofen, just a little bit unwatchable. Okay, great. Thanks, Vesta. So long for a bit there, the timer was just really slowing down and ratcheting forward very oddly. So it was something over which I had no control. But the timer seems to be running much smoother now. Anyhow, this is a paper that went into enormous detail, and we will be putting a link up to it, going into particular detail about how this particular version of Archaeopteryx is sufficiently distinct that it justifies being a separate species, mayhaps, as well as broadening the range of Archaeopterids, which formerly were basically known only from the Solnhofen. And this is from another area in Germany, so these would be cousin groups. And this is implying, therefore, a whole range of these things that we don't have the fossils for because the luck of the draw just didn't capture them. At no point is Sarfati and Tay dealing with this other than just basically to flip it off to say, oh, well, that's their evolutionist thinking again. But you can dive into the paper because I'll be putting up full length on it. It's a ResearchGate copy, and have fun with the bloody thing because it is meticulous. It's covering every little ups and downs and ins and outs, and is yet another measure of how functionally useless young Earth creationist is. So while we're still in semi-functional territory, let's get our Luskin list of the week out of the way. It's a trio of papers in 2017. Remember, 8 years ago, a lot of this stuff is surprisingly not current. The earlier part of the list were really up to date. They were in the 2020s at least. But now we're getting more and more stuff that's dragging back farther and farther, and that proportion of material that's relating to relatively recent technical papers is starting to be diluted. And we'll find out just exactly how much dilution as we continue on to the point where we will have looked at every bloody one of them. You got a paper by Collins and Anderson, which is about methylation issues, and is particularly relevant in the sense that there's nothing on it relating to junk DNA. Certainly that junk DNA is the predominant functionality of the system. Hey, caught a live stream. Yeah, hi, Maya. We were a little choppy earlier. Just a reprise now that you're in the feed here. Sarfati and Tay have bungled the Archaeoraptor matter, which was a fossil hoax from a generation ago that they're bringing up as a way to kind of spoil the waters. And then very tiptoey through Archaeopteryx to kind of shunt it aside from any supposed connection. It basically is the same kind of argument you get from intelligent design advocates, that Archaeopteryx is just a bird. Sarfati and Tay say, quote, it did not have intermediate features, rather it was a mosaic, unquote, as though that's actually helping their case any. Or that it's not a ancestor anyway, it's only a cousin, so it's the no cousins rule that Dwayne Gish plays all the time in his old apologetics. And supposedly it dates before the supposed theropod ancestors, which, as Jackson and I indicated with a big chart in Rocks Were There Volume 1, isn't true. That the dinosaur theropods that are the group from which birds are developing, we know will well predate Archaeopteryx. So they're not just Cretaceous elements that was the mantra that Jonathan Wells had. And because he's not really citing a hell of a lot of sources in this area, not entirely sure how much of it is actually channeling that intelligent design apologetics and just riffing off of all of that. So anyway, back off to Casey Luskin. Another paper is Krufzik et al. From 2017. It definitely is about AALUs, but it's outlining a mechanism for detecting them or using them as a convenient target for detection in order to be able to better evaluate how chromatin structure may or may not be modified by them. And remember, we're already talking about a certain percentage, which can run into tens of thousands of examples, but nonetheless be a tiny sliver of all the available ALUs, let alone these other retrotransposons and pseudogenes and all the rest. So the fact that the paper is not making any direct claims about what proportion, or implying that it's going to be very something to, or that even every piece of chromatin is being affected by ALU. Um, is alternative splicing, and yet again, percentage like 1.5% are showing element connections, and no numbers that are being plugged in on this. You kind of wonder, this is a pure speculation issue as to what's attracting the intelligent design Luskin crowd to these various papers. Are they just going by the title and a quick breeze through the abstract? The Theodicy ones are ones where you'd have to really burrow down into the actual content of the paper. But we've also encountered examples before of where the Theodicy snag is right there in the bloody title as to what it's about. So you have to wonder, what was the mechanism that they're using to trawl these technical papers? Are they pulling up Google Scholar to particular topics and they're getting a citation dump and they're just dumping all of this material into that list? I don't know, because everything is in such willy-nilly order. There tend to be clusters of them from relatively the same time frame. So it's indicative of a very disorganized muck there. The description that was being made at the start of all of this implied that a bunch of their little club got together and kind of compiled this list. But quite obviously, there was no attempt to make it clear and coherent, which would either to put everything in alphabetical order within each category or put it in chronological order within each category. Neither one of those are clearly operating. So it's just a threadbare this and that and blah and blah. And whether or not any of them consciously were under the impression that nobody was going to be idiot enough to actually try to plow through every one of these bloody papers to check their relevance, sorry, that's my gig. That's what we do. So that is, I would be gobsmacked if this process doesn't continue relentlessly. We're going to be interesting because as we move farther down the road, we'll be leaving eventually. The vast majority of these things clearly all relate to kind of ALU retrotransposon issues. So it's going to be a lot of the same boring material. Later on, there are SINEs and these other short interspersed elements that are under their own separate categories, but clearly it's a much smaller block. And there's one or two examples that I've encountered so far of double dipping where the same paper is actually in a couple different categories. So I'm weeding those out as we go. And in some instances, when particularly interesting topics come up, then as you have seen in previous episodes, we will be exploring all of that to try to connect up the dots and some of those will jump ahead in their list farther down the road because they will be functionally talking about the same issue, but they're ending up in different subcomponents. It's helpful to compile a thing like this because it does relate you to the bigger picture in terms of how intelligent design apologetics works, as well as a dive into the actual technical literature and a reminder over and over and over and over and over again that the standard model that is presented by Dan Stern-Cardinale when criticizing Luskin is alive and kicking, and it's not going away. So la-di-da. We'll get some updates. Jackson, I'm sure, will be delighted to know that I am nearing the end of the cosmology chapter. Holy shit, this thing has gone on for an awful long time. But it's because it really did dive into an awful lot of areas, and it was an ongoing example of brand new papers that have been popping up on star formation issues, about planetary system dynamics, about a bunch of stuff. But at any rate, just got the items out of the way relating to Saturn's moons and sidebar material about details that how creationists are fiddle farting around about the particular planets, Mars, Venus, and all that, as well as the gas giants. So that now is whittling things down to where there's only one big topic zone left. Go through my master document, kind of where I want to drop it in, and that is exoplanets and origin of life issues. Needless to say, we will not be able to put a big scoop about, oh, we've figured out how life originated, but there's been an awful lot of recent technical literature that bears upon this too, in like a footnote, to keep people up to speed on that, and all the whole issue of exoplanets. Philosophically, this is an area where young Earth creationists and intelligent designers pretty much plop down in the same ballpark, in that they really don't like the idea of extraterrestrial life. They might be able to move the goalposts somehow, but they're really uncomfortable about it. Ironically, this was not necessarily a position. There was a religious apologist that my friend Peter actually called my attention to from the 19th century, the 1880s and 90s, who was no problem at all if there was extraterrestrial life, and from a religious perspective to boot. And clearly some people will be able to adapt to it effortlessly if that should turn out to be the case. We'll see where things are going on all of that subject matter, but we'll want to have everything up to speed to kind of put the benchmarks down as to who's staking out what position and what the current lay of the land is, all that. And at that point, I will be able to put to bed that chapter. I still got to put a mound of technical sources into the master bibliography, because I'll be wanting to ask a local astronomy professor here and his group out at EWU to go through and vet the material. And for that reason, I got to have the master bibliography structured. So if they need to look up whatever the sources are, they'll be able to do all of that. That'll be a thing which, cross fingers, we'll launch that in February. At that point, once the chapter is put to bed, then I will be moving to intrude my material into the other chapter, Noah's Lost Worlds, that Jackson has completed, and add all of that stuff, which is going to have all the material on whales. There's going to be more on bird evolution, frankly, and the like. And because we were covering tetrapods in a previous chapter. It's just delightful, because it's a constant wrestling with the availability of all the hello purple, the availability of all that technical literature. To some extent, it's been daunting because so much is available, and I had to kind of do a triage. All of us have had to do a kind of a triage as to what we want to bring up and what we don't. One of the priorities that we have with the book is to keep holding creationists' feet to the fire on matters of fact. And one of the advantages of having a broad range of material that we're dealing with is that we can see how creationism evolves over time. What topics are really big deals for a while and then kind of fade away when it turns out to be really, really stupid and that they don't want to deal with them anymore. Others where there's camps that keep pushing an argument where other groups have kind of given up on it. And there's quite a few examples of that in the cosmological frame, where you get moments of enthusiasm, or little David Capege is prone to beat drums over and over again and be snarky. But these are not necessarily topics that are more broadly reflected. And then, of course, you got the occasional bottom feeders, the internet crowd, the kinds that that will earn the ire of Vice Rhino or Dapper Dino or others who pay much closer attention to this, and to some extent Joel Duff, although he does tend to focus more on the material that are operating at the big groups, ICR, CMI, and AIG, rather on the road, who are kind of playing smorgasbord with all the little ins and outs and ups and downs and stuff. There was an example that's not relating directly to the creationism book, but on the future religion book, or books. That may be a 3-volume one. It's very possible by the time we get down to that. There's a guy, a Reverend John Hall, who Vice Rhino had done a video on from a 2018 sermon, and it was about biblical apologetics and all the rest. And I found out this guy had a whole long string of these silly things that were available online. And so I had that as a project of ferreting out and taking some notes on it. And in fact, some of the stuff I was thinking Apologia when he was when Hall was going on and on about biblical prophecies and messianic prophecies that are fulfilled by Jesus and all that. And yet the only example he seems to like to bring up is the supposed prophecy about the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem, which is not necessarily like the book of Daniel. It's not really a prophecy because by all reasonable references from the regular scholars, Luke's gospel is written around 70 CE, which is at the time of the conquest by the Romans and the destruction of Masada and all the rest. And therefore, the destruction of the temple is the thing he's experiencing. And then he's just pulled in fan fiction lore to connect up. And that, by the way, Luke's gospel is the only one that alludes to this temple matter. Well, from Hall's point of view, boy, he's just going gangbusters with it. And he does this cute little end run where he tries to make it that atheists, rather than just regular biblical scholars, that atheists are requiring that all of the discussion of prophecies have to be done by the 3rd century when Christianity was legalized, and that supposedly the atheist position is that they're going back and creating the narrative and editing things out and supplying all of this stuff to fit up the prophecies. And you can make argument that something of that may have occurred occasionally. But then the one example he brings up doesn't require that at all. So he's trying to set up an arbitrary standard that there were all of these earlier versions of the gospel that had been knocking around and buried for protection and all the rest, that supposedly the redacted go back and unearth them all and then interpolate and add in like little post-it notes, and that this would be quite impossible for them to do. And if that was necessary to have done, yes, it would have been, but that's not what's going on with the Luke Testament, because that would be a matter of somebody at the time retrofitting it, and then everybody after that copying all the way down the road to until you get to the canonical literature. So it's a strained and tangentious argument, and who knows, apologies. It's starting to kind of catch up. Appreciate snarky as long as it includes something original. Yes. The problem is there's no originality in any of that. It's a fun thing and more difficult, frankly, to do research on those theological matters, because unlike astrophysics, where the vast majority of the technical literature is open access these days, biblical apologetics and a lot of these journals where a lot of this stuff is going on either aren't open access or aren't even available online. So there's a great deal of print apologetics that circulates at the seminary level that gets alluded to in books and the like, that when somebody mentions it in a video, that you can kind of tap into some of this stuff. But it's a more daunting, quirky cast. One might argue that maybe it's because religious apologists, the last thing they really want is for things to be really accessible for people to cross-check on all this stuff. So let us thank our, let me get my little menu popping up here. There you go. Let me thank our dear people who are sticking with the old RJ on the Patreon front, bearing in mind that we are coming in. I'm just at the stock market has gone into 49,000. Who knows? Maybe all of those fat cats that have got so much money to play around with will push it above 50,000. Maybe, whether or not it's going to stay that way for long. Possibility that could be coming up in the could be if NVIDIA, which is one of the big drivers of an awful lot of this investment, fails to meet a quarterly growth measure. That could be a thing that could trigger things off. Did everyone hit a thumb? Yeah, my counter is still going good enough. Let's put our advert on about rocks for there. Get that out of the way while we're still on a signal that's running. Boom, beam, 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 beam. Come on, start running, start running. There you go. My laptop here is a little bit leisurely on its opening up a video files, and I don't know whether the side are just a little tired today. That's entirely possible. These things happen. Anyway, enjoy the dulcet tones of Peter's advertisement for the Roxford era. And proceed. There we go. Yes, everybody. I typically don't mention the thing. You know, everybody watch the video, subscribe, put a like up, put commentary on in the once if you're seeing it after the fact and all of that. I guess there's some stupid algorithm out there that pays close attention to all of that. Do what thou wilt in that matter. My point is to try to get the source material lined up and have it topical and relating the material. Thought maybe you weren't able to hold on to the stream once you'd caught it. Yes, yes. Okay, we're going to go Ghostbusters there. Okay, yeah. For those of us who, the favorite sound effect for me is when they go into the elevator and they turn the machines on in the hotel elevator, and there's this, and the two other guys, Vinkman and all that, they step kind of away because of all of the sound effects that are coming along. It's a delightful, a classic film. Ghostbusters is amongst the best comedic thrillers ever done. I put it with my other favorite, which is in a much simpler time, but the old Ghost Breakers with Bob Hope and Paulette Goddard from 1940, which was the second film they did together. But I think it's the best one that they did. It's sharp, clever snarkiness that used Bob Hope to the best set. And he went on and did a lot of movies in various times over the years. And of course, the road pictures with Bing Crosby and that, which have their own little charm. But I've always been very fond of Ghost Breakers. Anyway, sorry for the film side. There we go. I have my things. So anyway, we'll be continuing episode by episode, item by item, source fact by source fact. I pretty well finalized the idea that once I get through the whole Sarfati and Tay thing, the next books that we will analyze will be cross-comparing the two Duane Gish creationism books, Evolution, The Fossils Say No, and which was from the 70s, and then the 1995 iteration, Evolution, The Fossils Still Say No. And I think you ever saw the Bob Hope one? I'll have to look that up. Yeah. Ghost Breakers, and it's type that in there. A hell of a lot of movies that I'm just flabbergasted by are available either on YouTube or in some cases archive.org, and there's a whole bunch of little spots where these things can pop up. Freebie. And some of the stuff is just amazing, where they've dredged up films that I hadn't even known were known. They were like lost films. FP1 Antwortet nicht, which is a German science fiction story from the early 30s about a giant flying platform out in the Atlantic, was considered lost for years. And lo and behold, somebody found a bloody print of the thing, and I watched it on YouTube a couple months ago. And then all these delicious old, some of the quota quickies, as they were called, minor production British films that were done with British casts that were sort of in a conjunction with American producers so that they would be able to get the right thing, so they would be able to bring in the big American movies. And some of these things like were very early James Mason, very early Alistair Sim, before he became a classic film. He was the ultimate Ebenezer Scrooge, and also in that playing this droll detective in Green for Danger that was made after World War II. It's another one that's just marvelous. And he was an actor who was kind of played very quirky, accenty, oddball, peripheral characters, but he mellowed and improved over time to where he was just like a staggeringly powerful personality to have in this, with those great big eyes and that resonant voice of his, and has had quite a broad range of films that he did, which it's always fascinating when I can encounter a few more of these little things that deal with. The Ghostbreakers, as I said, was Bob Hope did with Paulette Goddard. They had done a remake of the Old Dark House or something like that, that had been made clunkily back in the early sound era. And I think there was maybe even a silent era version of it. This also is kind of clunky. It was okay, but when I actually saw the version, and I think it was from an old stage play that had been recycled in the house, and a poor couple gets involved with it, and you could sort of think of it as the weird, distant precursor to Rocky Horror Picture Show. Just add some songs and away you go. But the Ghostbreakers, as a second film for them, is just way better, and it's an original script, and it has a nice, neat balancing act to it. That it's smoothly paced. It's got genuine surprise. It's got neat little puzzle things as they're trying to find out what secret messages are done, and then you have to play things on a pipe organ and open up secret passages. I mean, there's an awful lot that's really neat on it. Oh yeah. I think there was a silent version of Old Dark House. I'm not swearing on a stack of Bibles on this one. And then there was an early sound version. I think Boris Karloff was in that. And that would have been really early, like 1929, 1930. And then the Paulette Goddard version that was 39, I think. And then they did Ghostbreakers. Paulette Goddard was, remember, at this time, the main squeeze of Charlie Chaplin, and she was in just the following year, The Great Dictator, that is kind of like the precursor to Mel Brooks' satire. And the guy that wrote the music for The Great Dictator was one of the rare examples, because Chaplin, although he didn't read music, he composed. So most all of the sound movies that tended to write music himself. Great Dictator was one of the few where he let someone else help, and somebody else was music man decades. So big up in there. Witty, the very I may regard that as an adventure. I was just rhapsodizing on Goddard and Charlie Dictator. Surprised times that anybody before talk connected. That we're going to be bouncing in and out of everything. So we put our adverts up. We put thank yous for Patreon. We'll be putting our links up tomorrow on that. I apologize for any weirdness in terms of glitchy audio, but after all, I'm not the one in charge of Restream. We do what we can. So everybody stay super safe, especially in the ICE raids and all of these other messes that are going on. Trump and his authoritarian, Steve Miller, who I think is one of the most genuinely evil people in American politics for a very long time, and J.D. Vance, who has all of the decency of a fetid turd on the sidewalk. The man has no shame. He's a shameless, pandering, arrogant suck up. And I think he's eyeing to become president of the United States. So he'll be presumably running in 28 and or a little earlier, maybe, if they try to invoke the 25th Amendment, which, of course, will piss Trump off enormously. But Peter Thiel and who's backer, who is just a crazy train Christian nationalist oddball, backing Vance himself, who's kind of like a neo-Catholic, hyper-conservative in that kind of Candace Owen branch of things. It scratched the surface as to their philosophical positions. These are extremely dangerous people. And again, don't blame me. I voted for Harris. So everybody stay safe. Have 100 wooden penguins and have ice running around our city, indeed. And they're going to try to push their luck on a lot of these things. They're heavily funded because of the big, beautiful bill thing. So they've certainly got resources available, but they're also seriously antagonizing millions and millions of Americans who are looking at this, and even people who had voted for him saying, well, I didn't vote for this. Well, sorry, you actually did. But anyway, got the idea. So everybody stay safe. Watch out for weather conditions and the like. The things can go up and down and in and out in any possible way. And bear in mind that even though in front of every silver lining is a dark cloud, there are also silver linings. And our goal as a republic is to stick with this thing, because I'm not willing to give up on our republic just because we are going to have another blip of Trumpian stupidity. And we need to get this out of our system and show in no uncertain terms why there's a better way. And we're going to go that better way. And Trump will be an eye blink in the history of the republic, even though he's going to want to think that he's the center of everything. So everybody stay safe. We will all be seeing you next week, and hope our connection is a tad bit better.